Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Great Shot Kid, the Nerd Party's podcast that focuses on the artistic and thematic and technical aspects of the Star Wars galaxy. I'm John.
And I'm Mike.
And this week we are going to be delving into the second part of our comparison of Ron Howard with Miller and Lord, the replacement for the Han Solo movie and his forebears. So before we get started, of course, want to mention we're here on the nerdparty.com, and you can go ahead and go to nerdparty.com/contact, and you can reach out to us that way. You can reach out to us on Twitter using the network Twitter handle @JoinNerdParty. You can find us on Facebook, of course, at facebook.com/thenerdparty, and we're the Nerd Party on Instagram. Please use the hashtag GreatShotKid. So with all of that said, I want to go ahead and I want to jump right into this. I want to ask which one you want to talk about first. We're looking at Apollo 13, which is definitely in the conversation as Ron Howard's best film, and 22 Jump Street, which is definitely in the conversation as Miller and Lord's best film.
Yes.
So we've got Battle of the Titans here going on, the best examples of their work. Which one do you want to talk about first?
I would say let's do 22 Jump Street first, because, this movie, we'll see how 22 Jump Street morphs into Apollo 13 or something along those lines.
I think that's an extremely interesting challenge. Yeah, okay. You had seen 22 Jump Street. I had not.
Yeah.
I saw 21 Jump Street for the first time for last week's show, and then I watched 22 Jump Street. And you had said it's next level. It ups its game big time. And I can report back and say you're absolutely correct. This is one of the funniest movies I've seen since stuff like Airplane or Real Genius or Naked Gun. Like this is something where I will go back to it and laugh just as hard the second time. But I want to get your perspective first on what is it that changed between 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street? What do you think took it up to this next level?
I think just the idea that they realized how ridiculous it is for them to even make this movie in the first place. I mean, 21 Jump Street was a ridiculous idea, but then when it worked, the idea, of course, you need to make a sequel, right? And then the question becomes, how do you make a sequel to this, and what are these sequels and everything? And I think the route that they went, which was basically just calling themselves out and basically making the movie extremely meta and all about how it is a sequel and how, the first one made a lot of money, so now they need to do just the same thing again, literally. That adds to a lot of, humor, and it also really sort of makes you think about, franchises and sequels and, what it is that's popular and what it is that's not and why and all that good stuff. And I just find it to be absolutely hilarious. In addition to, like, a lot of just, like in the first movie, just the kind of, like, straight up humor that comes from the narrative and everything. I don't know. I think it really, really works well.
I agree with you. I think all of those are very valid comments, very valid observations with what took it to the next level. I definitely tune in right in on that. I would add on there that watching 21 Jump Street, as we discussed last week, my reaction was, well, gosh, why doesn't Lucasfilm want something a little different, a little looser like this? And then I see 22 Jump Street, and I ponder, with that meta commentary that they're obviously very adept at making, had that started to sneak into Han Solo, and was that what scared Lucasfilm off? Because I look at, they're essentially saying with 22 Jump Street what people are saying about Star Wars becoming a franchise, just like a big machine franchise as opposed to a single filmmaker franchise, which is, you're just making these for money, you're just churning these out every year, this isn't as there is that commentary that's going on. And I can watch 22 Jump Street and think to myself, they might have been working that in, and that might have been, like they might have been told, hey guys, tamp it down. You don't want to go this way. And then they come out and they're like, come on, this is so funny. And just realizing that it's just in their DNA. They couldn't get away from it, as it were.
That could be. I don't know. Like some of the reports which have come out have said like there's been a lot of improvisation, but not improvisational comedy. Like they're sort of making it up as they go in terms of the Star Wars movie, but not in a not like in a joking way. You know what I mean? And I mean, I don't know. Like I can see that. Like I'm super curious to see how that manifests itself. In a basically non-comedy movie, if you want to call it that. But I don't know. I mean, like I'm sure that there's some of that going on. There has to be, because I mean that's really what this movie is. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to see.
I mean, the thing is though, with that whole improvisational thing, that actually, as I think about that actually speaks a lot to the way Lucas made the first Star Wars. That is a movie that we've talked about on the show, that people have talked to death, how it was made in the editing room, and that continued. There was so much stuff on the cutting room floor for the prequels as well. Well, episodes 2 and 3 at least, where Lucas has always said that his philosophy is like, so long as I got stuff set up, even if it's not in the script, you know what? We've got the camera set up, we got the actor here, I got this idea, let's shoot this too. And there was, I don't know if you recall the report. It was, I think, back when a Star Wars Insider magazine was still, the primary source of information or whatever. But there was somebody who went and found, quote unquote, the lost cut of Star Wars. The first one that had a lot more improvisational stuff. And he even pointed out points where you could see some of the comedy and some of the more improvisational stuff making it into the final cut of the film. And I'll direct it, if there's somebody who out there in the audience who doesn't know, the shot as they're walking up and they look into the docking bay and they say, you came in that thing, you're braver than I thought. Nice, come on. At the very beginning of that shot, you'll notice Han Solo is carrying his gun behind his back like he's trying to hide it and looking over his shoulder. And there's a wipe, it's a very quick cut, and you have to really look for it. Apparently, in the previous cut, that was because they had made a joke about them, a joke out of them sneaking around this giant installation where Han was, twiddling his thumbs and looking up in the air and whistling and stuff like that. So, I don't know. I mean, like, if anything, that improvisational comment becomes even more strange, because that is, in fact, like, why couldn't you just bring in an editor and say, okay, great, indulge it, and then our editor is going to help you pare that down to what we want.
Yeah, I remember that article. I think it was in the Star Wars Insider. And the thing, I mean, just to kind of add to what that cut was that was like the assembly cut of the movie from what I understand, which I think people have like kind of a misconception of what those things are. Like there's this one movie journalist who is every time he interviews a director, he always asks, this is his go-to question, it's, how long was the first cut of the movie? And the directors are usually like 3 hours, and then the headline is, they cut an hour out of this movie. It's like one of those things. And like I think as they say in that article, like the goal of an assembly cut more than anything is to basically show the filmmakers everything that they have, So like, it's, I don't think that it was the type of thing where, probably when the editor was cutting that movie and they stuck the whistling scene in there or whatever it was, they were probably like, this is never going to make it into the movie, whatever, but I need to show Lucas what he has, so that he, in case there is something there, he can, chop it out. But, it does certainly demonstrate the fact that, Lucas was willing to sort of come up with this stuff on the set. I mean, the other thing that people always bring up is, especially in relation to the Han Solo movie, someone was referencing, like, what's the most famous line from Empire Strikes Back? I love you, I know. And that was a line which was essentially improvised. It wasn't in the script. And
it was improvised because Harrison Ford and Irving Kershner both said this doesn't feel right for him, and it had been a long day. And Harrison Ford was like, "I'll just come up, just roll. I got this. You know." And it was actually, if you go back to, I don't know if they make reference in the making of The Empire Strikes Back that Rinsler put together, but one of the source books for that was 20th Century Fox unit publicist Alan Arnold wrote a book called Once Upon a Galaxy. I actually have a paperback copy that I found years ago. That actually upset Carrie Fisher on set, if I recall correctly, because she didn't know that was going to happen, and she was like, "Hey, clue me in, guys."
That book, and yeah, I think this is the most amazing thing ever. I love that book for more than anything else. There's one chapter in there, which was the day that they shot that scene where they put a mic on Irving Kershner and basically have a transcript of everything that happened on the day. And I mean, that to me just completely blows my mind that we have like a blow by blow, first person narrative of the creation of one of the best scenes in movie history,
Yeah.
And in that chapter, you can read Kershner and Ford in, I think, Ford's dressing room discussing the line and what they're going to do, and then you can see them like actually work it out so that they can get to the point where they say "I love you," I know, and then everything with the lighting and everything like that. It's astounding, but you can actually witness how this thing came to be, how this line came to be, on a step-by-step basis.
And an added additional interesting note with that too is that that's an improv scene that comes up. Kershner was a champion of it, and he said, "You got to do this. You got to do this. Is going to work. This is going to work." And Lucas was highly skeptical and said, "No, it's not. I want to go back to the line. And then they had a test screening, and the audience went nuts for it. And Lucas, at least, looked at Kershner and said, "Okay, you won.
Yeah.
You're right." And so it's like it's one of those things where, how big a crowd did they give it to? Is it that their improv and the way that they were going didn't work? Is it that they were made nervous? Or, like, why not just give them a chance and then, again, fix it in the editing bay if you need to?
I wonder, I mean, this is something which, John Carpenter talks about on the commentary for Vampires, his masterpiece, in which...
It's not his masterpiece, but I have warmed to it of late, thanks to you.
He talks about, because there was a lot of improv in that movie, and he said that sort of the policy on the set, which they set forward, was do the scene as scripted, and then after they get everything that they need, as was planned, he would then reset and let the actors do whatever the heck they wanted to. And the result was, there was a lot of stuff that didn't work, but there are a number of key scenes where they actually use what the director but there are a number of key scenes where they use what the actors came up with on the set, because it ended up being the superior thing. And I'm wondering if Lord and Miller maybe were kind of used to working in a system which sort of allowed them to kind of make their own decisions on the set. And if they felt really strongly about this improvisation, they just wouldn't bother shooting what was scripted.
Right. There's a difference between Kershner at least shot what was on the script and then improvised. Is it that they improvised and said, we don't need that? And so, yeah, that would make sense for Lucasfilm to balk at that, and Kasdan as well, to, maybe go a little Max Fisher about it. It's my script. Don't change it.
Yeah.
So little Rushmore reference for anybody who doesn't know who Max Fisher is. If you haven't seen Rushmore, you need to. But, yeah, so let's then shift over to Apollo 13. which was an Oscar-nominated for Best Picture film. Had a lot of Oscar nominations for acting, technical stuff. Apollo 13 was really Ron Howard arriving as a major filmmaker in a lot of ways, because this was his, like, I will always feel bad for Ron Howard, because I think that he was in a situation where there were so many fantastic films in contention for Best Picture that year that he was doomed. Like any other year, Apollo 13 wins, but because of its competition, it gets sunk. And I because that was one of those years with the Academy Awards where I remember my friends and I just saying there's no like real loser here, and there's no real winner, because all of these actually deserved it. And so there's that. But Apollo 13 is definitely a very different vibe from 22 Jump Street. I think with what we've been talking about with the improvisation, coming back and seeing it this time, what I see with Apollo 13 is a director who, and this will borrow a phrase from the way you refer to Jonathan Frakes, somebody who took a script and directed the hell out of it and said, this is the story that I have, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to just max it out and make it fantastic. And so, I mean, in light of that, I like when you hold this up against 22 Jump Street, do you see the same sort of thing, or do you see a similar sort of energy? What do you see that sets this out?
No, yeah, I pretty much agree with what you're saying. I think like 22 Jump Street, they had like a very solid premise, and they kind of like found the movie, over the course of the production. Whereas with Apollo 13, I feel like, they had everything pretty well locked down prior to filming, and then every shot, every line of dialogue, everything feels like a very deliberate and necessary piece of the puzzle, in order to construct this movie. And it is an incredibly distinct style. And I mean, that's something which I think it was Scott Weinberg said this on Twitter, a film critic. He's like, if you hired Lord and Miller to make your movie and you didn't like what they were doing, so then you hired Ron Howard to replace them, that suggests that you have no idea what kind of movie you're trying to make, because they really are completely different, opposite ends of the spectrum in that regard. And, I wonder if their thinking was like, Lord and Miller bring something to the table which really we've never seen in Star Wars before. And we've got a solid script, and anyone can make this into a good movie. But if we get these guys to come in and do this, maybe they can make it even better. And the result was, catastrophic failure in the minds of Lucasfilm, at which point they were like, let's just retreat to like an extremely safe option where we know exactly what we're going to get. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It's funny because like it always feels like these last 2 weeks, it almost feels like we're giving backhanded compliments to Howard. But I think that it's so important, especially if somebody hasn't seen Apollo 13, you really need to. Because this is his calling card. This and Cinderella Man are hands down the best things that he's probably ever going to do as a filmmaker. And that doesn't mean that he's not going to produce something good down the road, but I think that it very much speaks to what he's capable of doing when he really feels on his game. I also think that the way he handles Apollo 13 and the way that he gets, so much out of everything, and the way that you even feel like you're in space. The thing that really struck me about it this time, and I remember feeling this way the first time I saw it, but seeing it at home even, is getting so drawn into it and buying into the premise so much that even though I knew how the story was going to end, I also was invested. I was also tense. I was also, willing to suspend all of my knowledge and come into this and believe what was going on and feel scared for the characters and feel like there was a sense of danger and there was a sense of suspense that I totally went along with. And I just think it's important not to take any of this discussion as being dismissive toward Howard as a director, and I think also paying attention to, because we watched The Paper last time and we watched Apollo 13 this time, and I'd had the question with you about, and they're keeping the cinematographer, they're keeping this person, he's just coming on and he's plugging in. Well, that with Apollo 13, it's a different crew in a lot of regards, but you still get a great movie. And so I think that speaks to what the type of director that Howard is, which is probably what a big budget franchise type of thing really does need, which is a manager, somebody who can recognize it and say, I'm not here to force you to do it my way. I'm here. You've got your skill set. I'm going to get the best out of you by interacting with you. And so, like, I almost, to add another layer to it, is it possible that Lord and Miller were fighting what other people on the set were trying to do to say, no, do it our way? It's complete speculation. I've read nothing like that. I'm just trying to look into the situation. I'm not saying this is the case, but is it possible that there's a conflict there? Because, they of course leaked the story naturally that people applauded when they heard that Ron Howard was coming on set. And I was rather dismissive. I was like, well, of course, Ron Howard's directing your movie. Hey, at the very least, you're going to be like, yes, my bosses like this, and so I'm going to applaud. But at the same time, does that story, maybe there was some, back and forth on the set where they were trying to force people to do what they didn't want to do, like the cinematographer or something.
I kind of doubt that, because I feel like, when you're encouraging improvisation and that sort of thing, you're basically saying that you want everyone's input, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like that was the case. I think maybe that was the case with, the studio, the higher ups, that sort of thing. Like maybe they were saying, hey guys, can you do it like this for us, please? And they're like, no, we're doing it our own way. But on the set, I feel like, with the people sort of beneath them, they probably had a good relationship if they were doing things like improv. That would just be my guess. Again, I don't know. But it just seems to me that like improvisation in general encourages collaboration, encourages input from everyone involved. And obviously, if someone's asking you what you think and asking you, how you would do something, then that's going to make them, I think, happy. I mean, maybe there was a case where it felt directionless, maybe there were some people on set who were like, I don't know what to do because you're not telling me what to give you. I mean, that could be, an obvious, side effect of that, but I don't know. I don't know anything, about what happened, specifically, but my guess would be that wasn't the case. But in regards in regards to Ron Howard, and not being dismissive of Ron Howard, like, yeah, I don't want to come across as dismissive of Ron Howard either, because he's clearly a better director than Lord and Miller. I think maybe Lord and Miller could create a better movie given the right circumstances, maybe in this case, as well. But Ron Howard is certainly the better director, as, evidenced by Apollo 13, which is a masterpiece, and it's really kind of weird. Like, I saw it in the theater, and I loved it, got the laser disc and everything, and watched it, numerous times. But it's one of those movies where, for whatever reason, I just kind of took it for granted. And, it's not something which is in heavy rotation. But every time I come back to it, for whatever reason, as soon as I start watching it, I'm immediately sucked in. And when I get to the end of it, I'm like, why is this not in the conversation? There's your touchstones like Raiders of the Lost Ark and, Boogie Nights and Die Hard and Alien and all these movies where you're just like, of course that's one of the best movies ever made, but Apollo 13 has never been that for me, and every time I watch it, I think, why isn't it? Like, why do I not put this on the same pedestal that I put Back to the Future or, The Big Lebowski or anything like that?
I think it gets back to the fact that it was released in an extremely strong year. It was up against Pulp Fiction at the Oscars, if I recall.
No, it lost to Braveheart, I think.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, Braveheart sort of sucked all of the... Braveheart sucked all of the wind out of the room for everybody else. Like, Braveheart, conquered the Oscars, as it were. And so I do think that it's one of those things where it just got lost in the shuffle, as it were, as things went forward. But I think also it's not a it's not a genre shaking sort of movie. It's not a slap you in the face sort of movie. It's simply an incredibly well made, and I agree with you, masterpiece. And the thing is, that doesn't stick in the memory as much because Back to the Future, when that came out, caught people off guard, and it was like, oh my gosh, and time travel and all of these interesting questions that it's asking about all of that stuff. And you got the zany Christopher Lloyd character and Michael J. Fox at the apex of his career, and the whole thing gets to act as a time capsule of the 1980s while, being a nostalgia trip for the 1950s. So it speaks to two different generations at the same time. And now it's become, double nostalgic like Grease was and stuff like that. But Apollo 13 doesn't really... I mean, Apollo 13 is a nostalgia trip for the space program, but, maybe because the space program's been dead for so long that it doesn't get mentioned as much, because when was the last time a shuttle went up? Does anybody even remember? I mean, everything's just communication satellites now, and probably secret government mind control programs, but we're not supposed to talk about those. I don't think.
Did I ever tell you about the time I met Jim Lovell?
No, I would love to hear about it.
My grandfather walked the Appalachian Trail a couple of times, which is from Georgia to Maine, for those people who don't know, through the mountains.
He walked the whole thing?
The whole thing, yeah.
Wow.
Twice.
That is a huge accomplishment, Mike. That's amazing.
Yeah, and he was like 65 years old when he did it, too, which is
wow.
Crazy. But regardless of any of that, older than that, it doesn't matter. Regardless of any of that, when he walked it, you would meet people along the way or whatever. It takes like 3 months to do or whatever it is.
Sure.
One of the people who he met and hiked with for a good portion of the time was Jim Lovell's son, the little kid at the academy. The one who's
watching with rapt attention with the rest of the nation.
Right. That kid. My grandfather walked the Appalachian Trail with him. And they became friends, and they stayed in touch and everything like that. And he's now a gourmet chef who owns an extremely, upscale restaurant in the Chicago suburbs. And the whole place is like sort of like a tribute to his dad in a lot of ways. Like there's like this massive mural which is painted like behind the entrance, when you come in, which is like a sort of very artistic, stylized version of the patch that they wore on the mission. And like cool. in the basement area, they've got like basically like a museum with all this sorts of artifacts like moon rocks and stuff like that. But anyway, so we went there because my grandfather wanted to see his friend and everything, and he's the guy who owns it and everything. So we went to this restaurant, and we're sitting there, and at one point, these like three people come in, like an older couple, and then a woman who's probably in her like 50s or something like that, and we're like, is that? And like they were just kind of like in a table off to the side, and it was Jim Lovell and his family who were just there because he's got an office upstairs or whatever, and he was in town for whatever reason, and they were literally just having dinner off to the side there, and we're like my sister and I are like freaking out, like that's the guy, that's it, that's him, that's Tom Hanks, it's Tom Hanks. And like my sister's like kind of like listen, as they're talking about some completely boring, like domestic whatever, and she's just like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard in my life. They're just like real people. So at one
astronauts are people too.
So at one point, the waiter or
Join
whoever
the
who
nerd
knew, sort of that, my who my grandfather was in relation or whatever, he went up to Lovell and he's like, hey, would you mind going over and saying hi to this table or whatever? So he came over and he shook all of our hands and, talked to us for a few minutes and everything. Really, really nice guy, and it was definitely a highlight for me, because how often
That's
do
so
you get to
cool,
meet
man.
an astronaut, let alone, I would say probably more than any other astronaut, I know more about this guy
Yeah.
because of this movie,
Yeah, and that is a really cool story, man. That restaurant still exists in Chicago. Yeah,
It's called Levels of Lake Forest. It's a steakhouse.
Levels of Lake Forest.
Yes, it's
Okay.
a steakhouse. Yeah.
Ooh, all right. Well, I'm disappointed that the many trips that I took to Chicago for work over the years, I never got a chance to go there and didn't even know of its existence. So I would love to check it out. But on top of that's a great story.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So okay, just to wrap it up, then I think both of these are films well worth seeing for completely different reasons. I don't know why, but we've had the discussions. Everybody's had these discussions about who gets the director credit. Is it going to be a split direct? Blah blah blah. I think that Apollo 13 answers hands down. It's going to be Ron Howard's credit at the end of this. I think that they're going to say thanks for assembling this stuff and everything, but he's going to reshoot a ton of things and make it. These aren't normal pickups. I think that is very much the case.
The fact that it's still going on after all this time, it's like, wow, yeah, he really is. Did you see the picture that he posted the other day that has the internet going crazy?
No, I saw the one where he showed the smoking speeder, where he had it was a video, actually. It was a, 10-second video or something. And I want to give credit to, I think it was Tristan Riddell, co-host of Nerd Nuptial here on the Nerd Party, who commented, well, you'd think he'd put it in landscape instead of portrait mode on his phone.
Oh, that was
whatever.
me. That was me.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah.
That was you. I'm sorry. I misattributed. That actually belonged to you at Mumbles3K on Twitter.
Here, check your phone. I just sent you the picture.
Okay. Hang on. This is a live reaction, folks, as to the picture that he sent. Oh, neat. What?
So people are like, is it the Death Star? Is it the what?
That is definitely what was once referred to in the action figures as a Death Squad commander helmet. And that is, you know what? I'm going to go on a reach here. It is not the Death Star. No, definitely not the Death
I
Star.
don't think it's
This
the Death
is a
Star.
cell bay.
A cell bay? Okay.
I'm willing
Yeah.
to bet that this is a cell bay.
Because
Yeah.
because it looks like, I think that's, it looks like from that scene in A New Hope,
Yeah, the control panels are definitely, Imperial and everything, but I think that looking in the background, you don't see the typical lighting scheme in the walls that Gil Taylor contributed for us. But and are those people over on the? Oh, we'll have to share this photo. Maybe this will be the photo for our show, but it looks like there are people standing off in the background on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Those
That
look
could
like
just be
heads.
some crew members, whatever, doing their thing.
You think he's taking a picture? No, we're fine. Let's just grab a smoke break. That's cool. No, that's I do have to give him a lot of credit for he is definitely having fun with this and definitely, aware that people are really tuned into it, and he is he is sharing some cool stuff. I got to make a point that his stuff gets seen first, or I got to monkey around with the algorithm or whatever. But yeah, in case you missed it, and then it's like 16 hot takes on the latest Marvel movie or something.
Yeah.
I'm good, guys. I'm good. I care about this more. So that's our discussion of 22 Jump Street and Apollo 13. Mike, if they want to interact with you online or listen to you elsewhere on other topics, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, and you can also find me on CommentaryTrackStars.com doing Commentary Trackstars, and you can find me on and you can find me on TalkFilmSociety.com doing a show called Soderbergh 2828. Our last episode comes out on Monday, and then you can find me on Trek.fm doing a show called The Edge, and another show called Stage 9 with you.
Yes, you do Stage 9 with me over on Trek FM, which is the same concept as Great Shot Kid, but for Star Trek creators. You can double back here to the Nerd Party and listen to me on Aggressive Negotiations with Matthew Rushing, where we go a little bit off the rails with the philosophical discussions of the Star Wars galaxy. And I'm co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig, which is a free-floating platform of insanity out there. And if you want to track me down online, you can just look for Kessel Junkie. So with all that, we've enjoyed comparing and contrasting, and I can say that after Apollo 13, I'm really looking forward even more to what Ron Howard's going to bring to the table for the Han Solo movie. But in the meantime, if you want to prepare for next week, we're going to be looking at costume design and how it's changed with the different phases of the Star Wars franchise.